There is a moment that most people never talk about. Not because it is hidden from them, but because once it happens, language fails. You have probably already brushed against it. Maybe it arrived at 3 in the morning when you could not sleep. Maybe it flickered across your awareness during a conversation that suddenly felt scripted, hollow, like you were watching yourself perform a role you never auditioned for. Maybe it came as a single, quiet thought that lasted less than a second, but left a crack in everything you believed. The thought was simple. What if none of this is what I think it is? Not the world, not the people in it, not even the one I call me. And the reason that thought is so dangerous, the reason entire cultures and institutions have been built to keep you from sitting with it for too long, is that once you actually follow it to its conclusion, the architecture of your assumed reality does not just wobble, it dissolves. And what is underneath it is so shockingly different from what you were told to expect that your nervous system does not know whether to call it liberation or annihilation. Tonight, we are going to follow that thought all the way down. Not halfway. Not to the comfortable resting point where you can still keep your old story intact. All the way. Let us begin with something that happened in a physics laboratory, because that is where the crack first showed up in the modern world, even though contemplatives had been pointing at it for thousands of years. In 1801, Thomas Young set up an experiment so simple it could be done on a kitchen table. He directed light through 2 narrow slits cut into a barrier and observed the pattern that formed on a screen behind it. What he expected was 2 bright lines, one behind each slit, the way you would see 2 stripes of sunlight coming through 2 gaps in a fence. What he got instead was an interference pattern. Bands of light and dark alternating across the screen, the unmistakable signature of waves overlapping, their peaks and troughs adding together or canceling each other out. Light, it seemed, was not a stream of tiny particles. It was a wave. That was strange enough. But the real disturbance came more than a century later, when physicists refined the experiment to fire individual particles, one at a time, through the slits. A single photon. Then another. Then another. Each one landing on the detector as a tiny dot, the way a particle should. But after thousands of individual particles had been sent through, one by one, the pattern that emerged on the screen was not 2 clusters behind the 2 slits. It was the interference pattern, the wave pattern, as if each single particle had somehow gone through both slits simultaneously, interfered with itself, and arrived as a dot that collectively formed the signature of a wave. Pause on that for a moment. A single particle, with no other particle to interact with, behaved as though it existed in multiple places at once, as though it traveled every possible path simultaneously and only resolved into a single location when it was finally detected. This is not metaphor. This is not a spiritual teacher stretching a physics result to fit a narrative. This is what the mathematics of quantum mechanics describes, and it has been confirmed so many times, in so many variations, that no serious physicist disputes the result. They only dispute what it means, and what it might mean is what we need to sit with, because this is where the forbidden truth starts to show its face. The next chapter of the experiment is the one that should have rewritten civilization, and in a sense it did, but most people were never told. When physicists placed a detector at the slits themselves, a device that could determine which slit each particle actually passed through, the interference pattern vanished. The particles behaved like particles. 2 clusters. No wave pattern. The simple act of acquiring information about the particle's path changed the outcome. Remove the detector, and the wave pattern returns. The particle goes back to behaving as though it travels all paths at once. This is the observer effect, and it does not mean what the casual dismissal suggests. The casual dismissal says it is just the physical interaction of the measuring device disturbing the particle. But that explanation has been tested and stretched to its limits by increasingly sophisticated versions of the experiment, and the disturbance keeps pointing in the same direction. It is not the physical apparatus that matters. It is whether information about the path becomes available. Whether, in principle, it is possible to know. Consider the delayed choice experiment, conceived by John Archibald Wheeler in 1978 and carried out in laboratories multiple times since. In this version, the decision about whether to observe which path the particle takes is made after the particle has already passed through the slits, after it should have already committed to being a wave or a particle. And yet, the result still matches the choice. If you choose to look, the particle behaved as a particle. If you choose not to look, it behaved as a wave. As though the future decision reached backward in time and shaped what the particle did in the past. Wheeler himself said it. No phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon. The universe, at its most fundamental level, does not appear to exist in a definite state until something, somewhere, registers it. Now here is where most people stop. They hear this and they file it away as an interesting fact about subatomic particles, something that applies to the very small but not to the world they live in. They go back to their morning routine and their assumptions about solid objects and fixed timelines, and a reality that exists whether anyone is looking at it or not. And that filing away, that casual dismissal, is the lock. It is the exact mechanism that keeps the forbidden truth sealed. Because the forbidden truth is not that particles are weird. The forbidden truth is that the weirdness does not stop at the subatomic level. It cannot. The mathematics does not contain a boundary line that says quantum behavior applies here but not there. There is no known mechanism that draws a clean border between the quantum world and the so-called classical world. This is called the measurement problem, and it has been open for nearly a century. The greatest minds in physics have not solved it. They have only found ways to work around it, to use the math without confronting what the math implies. And what the math implies, if you follow it without flinching, is that the solid, observer-independent reality you were taught to believe in does not exist in the way you think it does. The world you experience is not a pre-existing stage on which you happen to walk. It is something that comes into definition through the act of observation itself. Not observation as in eyeballs and cameras, observation as in the registration of information. Consciousness encountering possibility and collapsing it into experience. If this is beginning to shift something in you, if you can feel even the faintest crack forming in your old assumptions, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel so we can keep going deeper together. This is where the Western scientific tradition and the oldest contemplative traditions converge. And the convergence is not a loose analogy. It is structurally precise. In Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual tradition of Indian philosophy, the fundamental teachings is that Brahman, the Absolute, is the only reality, and that the world of separate objects and separate selves is Maya, not illusion in the sense of being fake, but illusion in the sense of being a constructed appearance that depends on the observer for its form. The gap between where you are and where you know you could be is not a motivation problem. It is not a discipline problem. It is something much more specific than that. There is something underneath all of it, quietly running the show. I am hosting a free live transmission where I walk you through exactly what that is and how to finally shift it at the root. The link to register is in the description below. Save your seat. The moment you see this, you will understand why you could not see it before. The Mandukya Upanishad, one of the shortest and most dense texts in the tradition, describes 4 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and a 4th state called turiya, which is not a state at all, but the awareness that is present in and behind all 3. The teaching is that what you take to be waking reality has the same ontological status as a dream. It is real while you are in it. It is structured. It has rules. But it is not the ground. It is an appearance within consciousness, not a container that holds consciousness. When the physicist Eugene Wigner considered the implications of quantum mechanics for consciousness, he arrived at a similar place. Wigner argued that the equations of quantum mechanics, taken at face value, require a conscious observer to complete the process of measurement. Without consciousness entering the picture, the math describes an ever-expanding web of superpositions, everything entangled with everything else, nothing ever collapsing into a definite state. He called this the Wigner's friend paradox. If a friend inside a laboratory measures a particle and sees a definite result, but Wigner outside the laboratory has not yet looked, then according to the math, the friend and the particle and the entire laboratory remain in superposition from Wigner's perspective. The definite result only becomes definite when Wigner himself observes it. And if someone else is outside Wigner's room, the same logic applies again. The chain of superposition does not end until consciousness, at some level, registers the outcome. You might be feeling a kind of vertigo right now. Good. That vertigo is not confusion. It is the sensation of a fundamental assumption losing its footing. The assumption is this: that you are a small, separate self living inside a vast, independent universe that was here before you and will be here after you, and that your consciousness is a byproduct of your brain, a flashlight that illuminates a tiny corner of a pre-existing room. That assumption feels so obvious, so self-evident, that questioning it seems absurd. But the forbidden truth is that this assumption has never been proven. Not once. Not by any experiment. Not by any equation. It is a philosophical position, called physicalism or materialism, and it has been adopted as the default framework of modern science not because the evidence demands it, but because it is useful for building technology and making predictions about physical systems. Its usefulness has been mistaken for its truth. The hard problem of consciousness, named by the philosopher David Chalmers in 1995, is the formal acknowledgement that physicalism cannot explain the one thing you know most directly. You know that there is something it is like to be you. There is an experience of redness when you see red. There is a felt quality to pain, to joy, to the taste of salt. This subjective experience, this felt interiority, is what Chalmers calls qualia, and no amount of describing the physical processes in the brain, the neurons firing, the neurotransmitters releasing, the electrical signals propagating, explains why those processes are accompanied by experience at all. You can describe every physical detail of what happens in the brain when someone sees the color blue, And you have still said nothing about why there is a felt experience of blue rather than just information processing in the dark. A sufficiently complex computer can process the same wavelength data, but there is, presumably, nothing it is like to be that computer. The light is not on inside. This is not a gap that will be closed by better brain scans or more detailed neuroscience. It is a categorical gap. Physical descriptions describe structure and function. Experience is neither structure nor function. It is the medium in which structure and function appear. And this is where the forbidden truth begins to crystallize into something you can actually feel in your body rather than just think about in your mind. What if consciousness is not produced by the brain? What if the brain is produced by consciousness? I want to pause here and ask you something. When was the first moment you sensed that reality might not be what you were told it was? That something deeper was operating beneath the surface of your life? I would love to hear about that moment in the comments. Sit with that for a moment. Do not rush to agree or disagree. Just let the proposition exist in your awareness and notice what happens in your body when you consider it. Notice the subtle resistance, the part of you that says that cannot be right, that is not scientific, that is not how things work. And then notice that the resistance is itself an experience happening within consciousness. The objection to consciousness being primary is itself a phenomenon of consciousness. The doubt appears within the very thing it doubts. This is the structure of the forbidden truth. It is not hidden behind a locked door. It is hidden in plain sight, so close to you that you cannot see it for the same reason your eye cannot see itself directly. You are looking for reality out there, in the objects, in the external world, in the arrangement of matter and energy. And the entire time, reality is what is looking. Not the content of experience, the experiencing itself. The sheer fact that there is awareness at all, prior to what it is aware of. The physicist John Wheeler proposed a concept he called the participatory universe. He suggested that the universe does not exist as a fully formed thing waiting to be discovered. Instead, it is brought into being, in some sense, by the act of observation. He drew a picture of a capital U, with an eye at one end looking back at the other end, the universe observing itself into existence. This was not mysticism from a fringe thinker. Wheeler was one of the most respected physicists of the 20th century. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He coined the term black hole, and at the end of his career, after decades of working with the deepest equations of physics, he concluded that information, and the observation that creates it, is more fundamental than matter. His phrase was "it from bit." Every particle, every field, every element of physical reality derives its existence from the answers to yes or no questions, binary choices, information. And information requires a registrant. It requires something that knows. Now here is where this moves from a philosophical puzzle into something that can change the way you experience the next 5 minutes of your life. Because if the forbidden truth is that consciousness is not a product of reality, but the ground of reality, then everything you have been doing to try to fix your life from the outside is exactly backward. Not wrong in its details, backward in its direction. Think about how you have been taught to create change. You identify a problem in the external world. Not enough money, wrong relationship, unfulfilling career, body that does not look or feel the way you want. Then you strategize, you plan, you act on the external circumstances, trying to rearrange the pieces of the world until they match the picture in your mind. And sometimes it works, partially, temporarily. You get the thing, and for a while the inner state shifts. You feel relief, excitement, satisfaction. But then the feeling fades, and you are back where you started, scanning the external world for the next thing to fix. This cycle is so universal that most people assume it is simply how life works. Desire, effort, temporary satisfaction, new desire. The hedonic treadmill, an endless loop. But look at the direction of causation you are assuming. You are assuming that the external world is the cause, and your inner experience is the effect. Fix the outside, and the inside follows. What the forbidden truth suggests is that the direction is reversed. Your inner state, your consciousness, the quality of your awareness, is not the effect of your circumstances. It is the cause. Not in some magical wish fulfillment sense, in a structural sense. The way the observer in the double-slit experiment does not push the particle through one slit or the other. The observer's presence determines what kind of reality manifests. Wave or particle. Possibility or fact. The observer does not act on reality. The observer's relationship to reality determines what reality becomes. Consider what this means for something as specific and tangible as fear. Not fear as an abstract concept. The actual physical experience of fear as it lives in your body. You know the feeling, the tightening in the chest, the shallow breath, the narrowing of vision, both literal and metaphorical. The way time seems to speed up and slow down simultaneously. The way your thoughts begin to loop, rehearsing the worst outcome, running the disaster movie on repeat. Now, here is what is happening at the level of your nervous system. When fear activates, your amygdala fires before your prefrontal cortex has time to evaluate the situation. This is well-documented neuroscience. The amygdala's response time is roughly 12 milliseconds. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that can assess context, weigh evidence, and make nuanced judgments, takes several hundred milliseconds to come online. That gap, those few hundred milliseconds between the amygdala's alarm and the cortex's assessment, is where most of your life is being decided. Because in that gap, before you have consciously chosen anything, your body has already shifted into a physiological state. Cortisol and adrenaline are already flooding your system. Your heart rate has already increased. Your blood has already been redirected from your digestive organs to your muscles. Your immune system has already been suppressed, and your perception has already narrowed. You are now seeing the world through the filter of threat. And a world seen through the filter of threat looks threatening. It confirms the fear, which deepens the physiological state, which narrows perception further. This is a feedback loop, and it operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. You do not choose it. It chooses you, or so it seems. But here is the piece that changes everything. That feedback loop is not a closed system. There is a point of entry, and it is precisely the point that the forbidden truth illuminates. The point of entry is awareness itself, not thought, not analysis, not positive thinking or affirmation, or any of the strategies that operate at the level of content. Awareness. The bare fact of noticing what is happening while it is happening. When you become aware of fear as it arises, something extraordinary occurs at the neurological level. The act of observing your own internal state activates the prefrontal cortex, specifically the medial prefrontal cortex, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which have direct inhibitory connections to the amygdala. This is not metaphor. This is measurable. Brain imaging studies, particularly those conducted by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, have shown that the simple act of labeling an emotional state, putting words to what you are feeling, reduces amygdala activation. Lieberman called it affect labeling, and the effect is robust. The moment you shift from being inside the fear to observing the fear, the neurological signature of the fear begins to change. Not because you did anything to the fear, because you changed your relationship to it. You went from being the content of experience to being the awareness of experience. You went from particle to wave, if you will, from collapsed and fixed to open and possible. This is the observer effect operating in your own nervous system, and it is not limited to fear. It applies to every contracted state you have ever been caught in. Anger, grief, shame, craving, jealousy. The pattern is the same. The state arises. It captures attention. Attention collapses into the state, identifies with it, becomes it. And from inside the state, the world reorganizes itself to match. An angry person sees provocations everywhere. A grieving person sees loss in every corner. A person caught in shame sees judgment in every pair of eyes. The state does not just color perception. It generates a world. And that generated world reinforces the state. The loop tightens. But the moment awareness notices the state without collapsing into it, the loop cracks. Not because the state disappears. It might stay. The fear might still be there. The grief might still be there. But you are no longer inside it in the same way. You are the space in which it is happening. And that shift from content to context, from object to awareness, is the shift that the forbidden truth is pointing at. It is not a technique. It is a recognition. You are not the fear. You are what knows the fear. You are not the thought. You are what is aware of the thought. You are not the story. You are the awareness in which the story appears and disappears. And this recognition does not just change how you feel. It changes what manifests around you. Not through magic, through mechanism. When your state shifts from contracted to open, your nervous system shifts from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic recovery. Your heart rate variability increases, which is one of the most reliable biomarkers of resilience and cognitive flexibility. Your perception widens. You literally see more. Studies in attentional scope have shown that positive, open emotional states broaden the visual field and increase peripheral awareness, while contracted states narrow it. When you see more, you notice opportunities, connections, and options that were invisible to you 30 seconds ago. Not because they were not there, but because your perceptual filter was excluding them. You make different decisions. You respond differently to people. People respond differently to you. The external world begins to reorganize, not because you wished it into a new shape, but because you are now interacting with it from a fundamentally different place. If you are feeling the depth of what the observer effect truly means, here is something I want to share. Have you spent years chasing manifestation, visualizing, affirming, raising your vibration, only to watch the same patterns repeat? Every traditional method assumes the same thing, that you are separate from what you want. That separation was never real. You were chasing a signal you were already broadcasting. Beyond the frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery walks through all 9 frequencies. From the dense transmissions trapping you, through the ascending currents, to the master frequencies where consciousness becomes the field. Every method you tried sent a signal outward. This one tunes the signal you already are. Every day you delay, your nervous system broadcasts the same old signal, and breaking free gets harder. So move on it tonight. The link is in the pinned comment below. Now let us return to how this shift reshapes your lived reality. This is what the traditions mean when they talk about vibration or frequency, though those words have been so overused that they have lost their precision. Let us restore the precision. What they mean is this: the state of your nervous system, the quality of your awareness, the degree to which you are identified with thought versus resting as the awareness behind thought. These are not passive, private, interior phenomena. They are active, relational, and generative. They shape what you perceive, what you do, and what the world does in response. Not metaphorically, measurably. The HeartMath Institute has documented that the electromagnetic field generated by the human heart can be detected several feet away from the body, and that this field changes its coherence pattern based on the emotional state of the person. When you are in a state of coherence, which correlates with feelings of gratitude, compassion, or deep presence, the heart's electromagnetic signal becomes ordered and rhythmic. When you are in a state of frustration, anxiety, or anger, it becomes disordered and chaotic. And other people's nervous systems respond to this field, often without either party being consciously aware of it. I want to ask you something here. Have you ever experienced a moment where shifting your inner state, even slightly, seemed to change the way the external world responded to you? Tell me about it in the comments, because these experiences matter more than you might realize. So the forbidden truth is not just that consciousness is primary. It is that your consciousness right now, in its current state, is actively participating in the generation of your experienced reality, not as a spectator, as a co-creator. And the reason this truth is forbidden, the reason it has been buried under layers of materialist philosophy and institutional skepticism and cultural conditioning, is not that it is unscientific. It is that it is ungovernable. If people understood, truly understood, that their inner state is the primary variable in the equation of their life, the entire structure of external authority would lose its foundation. You cannot sell solutions to problems that are generated from within. You cannot maintain control over people who have discovered that the control panel is inside them. Let us go deeper, because understanding this intellectually is not enough. The mind can agree with every word I have said and still leave you exactly where you were. The mind is a brilliant tool for mapping territory, but it cannot walk the territory for you. The territory is walked in the body, in direct experience, in the felt sense of what is true, which is different from the thought about what is true. There is a practice that comes from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition called Tonglen, and I want to adapt its core mechanism for what we are exploring here, because it targets exactly the place where the forbidden truth becomes embodied rather than merely understood. The practice works with the breath, but not in the way most breathing exercises do. Most breathing exercises are designed to change your state, to calm you down, to shift you from anxiety to relaxation. Tonglen does something different. It asks you to move toward the difficult state rather than away from it. Here is what I want you to try, not later, not when conditions are perfect, but now, wherever you are, in whatever state you are in. Close your eyes if it is safe to do so. Take a breath and notice what is present in your body right now, not what you think should be there, what is actually there. There might be tension, there might be heaviness, there might be a buzzing restlessness, there might be numbness, which is itself a sensation, the sensation of not feeling. Whatever is there, locate it. Find its center. Now, instead of trying to breathe it away or replace it with something more pleasant, breathe into it. On the inhale, imagine your breath moving directly into the densest part of that sensation. Not to fix it, not to dissolve it, to meet it. To let your awareness make full contact with it. And on the exhale, let your breath carry a quality of spaciousness outward from that point. Not pushing the sensation away, expanding the space around it. Inhale into the density, exhale into spaciousness. Do this for a few cycles. What you may notice if you stay with it honestly is that the sensation begins to change on its own. Not because you forced it, because you stopped resisting it. The resistance was what kept it locked in place. The resistance was the collapse, the identification. The moment awareness meets the sensation without resistance, the wave function, if you will, opens back up. Possibility returns. The fixed, solid, seemingly permanent state reveals itself to be fluid, processual, alive. It was never a thing. It was a process that your resistance had frozen into the appearance of a thing. This is not positive thinking. This is not denial. This is the most radical form of honesty available to a human being. It is the willingness to be fully present with what is, without the overlay of what should be. And it is precisely this willingness that the forbidden truth requires. Because the forbidden truth does not give you a new story to believe. It takes away the need for a story altogether. It does not replace your old narrative with a better one. It shows you that you are not your narrative. You never were. The narrative is a construction of thought, appearing in awareness, useful for navigating the social world, but no more real than the interference pattern is real as a solid object. The pattern is real as a pattern. The story is real as a story. But you are the awareness in which the pattern appears. And that awareness is not a pattern. It is not a story. It is not a thing at all. It is the knowing itself, prior to all things known. There is a concept in the physicist David Bohm's work that maps onto this with remarkable precision. Bohm proposed that reality has two orders. The explicate order, which is the world of separate objects and events that we perceive with our senses, and the implicate order, which is a deeper, enfolded reality in which everything is interconnected. Everything contains everything else, and separation is an appearance rather than a fact. The explicate order is like the surface of the ocean, waves and ripples that seem distinct and separate. The implicate order is the ocean itself, the undivided wholeness from which all the waves arise and into which they all return. Bohm was not speaking metaphorically. He developed a rigorous mathematical framework for this, extending the equations of quantum mechanics into what he called the quantum potential, a field that guides the behavior of particles not through force but through information. The quantum potential does not push or pull. It informs, it shapes, and it is non-local, meaning it connects distant particles instantaneously, not through any signal traveling through space, but through the underlying wholeness of the implicate order. When two particles are entangled, which has been confirmed experimentally beyond any reasonable doubt, most famously through tests of Bell's theorem, they behave as a single system regardless of the distance between them. A measurement on one instantaneously affects the other, not after a delay, not through a signal, instantaneously. As though space itself is not what it appears to be, as though the separation between the two particles is an artifact of the explicate order, and at the level of the implicate order, they were never separate at all. Now feel what this means for you, not as a physics fact, as a lived reality. If the implicate order is real, if the deeper nature of reality is an undivided wholeness in which everything is enfolded into everything else, then the separation you feel between yourself and the world, between yourself and other people, between yourself and the life you want to be living, is not a fact. It is an appearance, a convincing one, a persistent one, but an appearance nonetheless. The loneliness you feel is real as a feeling, but the isolation it points to is not the structure of reality. It is the structure of a particular perceptual filter, one that the forbidden truth, once truly seen, begins to dissolve. And this is where we have to be honest about something that most teachings in this space avoid. The dissolution is not comfortable. It is not a blissful ascent into light and love. Or rather, it can be that sometimes, in moments. But more often, especially at first, it feels like loss. Because what dissolves is not just the suffering. It is the self that was organized around the suffering, the identity that was built on the problems, the story that gave you a role and a direction and a reason to get up in the morning, even if the role was the victim and the direction was struggle and the reason was to prove something to someone who is not even watching. When that story begins to thin, when you start to see through it the way you see through a dream upon waking, there is a period that the mystics call the dark night. St. John of the Cross wrote about it in the 16th century. The Zen tradition calls it the Great Doubt. It is the space between the old identity and the new way of being, and it is characterized by a profound sense of groundlessness. Nothing to hold on to, no story to orient by. The old motivations lose their charge. The old pleasures flatten. You are not yet established in the new way of seeing, but you can no longer fully return to the old one. You are between worlds. And here is what you need to know about that space. Because if you are listening to this, there is a good chance you are either in it or approaching it. The groundlessness is not a problem. It is the point. It is what the ground actually feels like when you stop confusing the story with the territory. The story felt solid because you believed it. The territory, which is awareness itself, does not feel solid in the same way. It feels open, vast, without edges, and that openness to a nervous system that has spent decades clinging to fixed reference points registers as threat, as loss, as something gone wrong. But nothing has gone wrong. Something has gone right for the first time. You are feeling the actual texture of reality rather than the texture of your narrative about reality. And the actual texture is not solid. It is alive. It is fluid. It is creative. It is the field of all possibility prior to the collapse into any particular form. This is what the quantum vacuum teaches us if we listen. The vacuum of space is not empty. It is the most energetically dense medium in the known universe. Quantum field theory describes it as a seething ocean of virtual particles, constantly arising and dissolving, potential forms flickering in and out of existence faster than any instrument can track. The zero-point energy of the vacuum, the energy that remains even when all thermal energy has been removed, is estimated by some calculations to be so vast that a single cubic centimeter of empty space contains more energy than all the matter in the observable universe. Empty space is not empty. It is full beyond measure. It is pure potential. And you, in your groundlessness, in your dark night, in your dissolution of the old story, are not empty either. You are closer to the vacuum state than you have ever been, closer to the source, closer to the field of all possibility. The discomfort you feel is the discomfort of a wave remembering it is the ocean. The ocean does not feel like a wave. It feels like everything and nothing simultaneously. And that is terrifying to the part of you that needs to be a specific, bounded, defined thing. But that part is not what you are. It is what you were pretending to be. And the pretending served you for a while. It got you through childhood. It got you through school. It got you through the social world with its demands for a consistent, presentable self. But it is not the truth. And at some point, the truth becomes more important than the comfort of the pretense. So here is the practice that matches this territory, and it is simpler than anything you might expect. It does not require a special posture or a quiet room or 20 minutes of uninterrupted time, though those things can help. It requires one thing: the willingness to ask a single question and to stay with the question rather than rushing to an answer. The question is this: what is aware right now? Not who is aware. Not what am I aware of. What is aware? Feel the difference. Who is aware sends you into identity, into the story, into the name and the history and the roles. What am I aware of sends you into the content, the objects of experience, the thoughts and sensations and perceptions. But what is aware points you toward the awareness itself, the knowing that is present before any content arises, the knowing that is present during every content, the knowing that remains when content changes or disappears. You cannot find it as an object because it is not an object. It is what knows objects. You cannot think your way to it because it is what is aware of thoughts. You cannot feel your way to it because it is what registers feelings. And yet, it is the most intimate, most immediate, most undeniable aspect of your experience. It is closer to you than your own breath. It is what you have been overlooking your entire life, not because it is hidden, but because it is what is doing the looking. When you rest as this awareness, even for a moment, something shifts that cannot unshift. You might go back to the story. You will go back to the story many times. The pull of identification is strong, and the habits of a lifetime do not dissolve in a single recognition. But the recognition itself is irreversible. Once you have seen that you are the awareness and not the content, you cannot fully unsee it. It becomes a reference point, a home base, a place you can return to when the story gets too loud or too painful or too convincing. And each time you return, the return is faster. The recognition is clearer. The gap between getting caught in the story and remembering what you are gets shorter. Not because you are practicing a technique, because you are remembering something that was always true. This is why the title of this exploration uses the word permanently. Not because a single moment of recognition transforms your entire life in an instant, though for some people it does, but because the recognition itself, once genuine, cannot be erased. You can ignore it. You can cover it over with distraction and busyness and the noise of the world, but you cannot unknow it. It lives in you now, a seed that will continue to grow whether you tend it consciously or not. And here is the final piece, the one that ties the physics and the philosophy and the practice into a single living understanding. If consciousness is the ground of reality, and if your awareness is not separate from that ground, then the shift that happens when you recognize your true nature is not just a personal, psychological event. It is a cosmological event. It is the universe becoming conscious of itself through you. Not as a metaphor, as a literal description of what is happening. The implicate order, the undivided wholeness that Bohm described, is knowing itself through the particular aperture of your experience. The quantum field, with its infinite potential, is collapsing into the specific, vivid, unrepeatable actuality of this moment through your awareness. You are not a spectator of the universe. You are the universe's way of looking at itself. And when you shift from identification with the content to recognition of the awareness, the universe's relationship with itself changes through you. The feedback loop between observer and observed, the same loop that determines whether a photon is a wave or a particle, operates at every scale of your life. When you observe your experience from a place of contracted identification, reality contracts to match. When you observe from a place of open, spacious awareness, reality opens. Not because you are manifesting in the popular sense, because you are participating. You are the observer, and the observer is not passive. The observer is constitutive. The observer is part of what makes reality real. So the forbidden truth is not a secret that someone is keeping from you. It is a truth that is so close, so obvious, so always already the case, that it hides in plain sight. The truth is that you are not in the universe. The universe is in you, not in your body, in your awareness. And the moment you recognize this, not as a belief, but as a direct, felt, undeniable experience, your relationship with everything changes, not because the world changes, because the one who is looking at the world has remembered what they are. And a remembered observer generates a different reality than a forgotten one. Consider coming back to this video each morning, even just for a few minutes, to let these words settle deeper into your nervous system before the noise of the day begins. And if someone comes to mind as you listen, someone with that quiet restlessness in their eyes, share this with them. When you pass along this kind of understanding, you are not just sending a link. You are extending the field of awareness itself, creating a resonance between two conscious observers that amplifies the recognition in both of you and ripples outward in ways neither of you can predict. Take one more breath. Feel the weight of your body wherever it is resting. Feel the aliveness in your hands, the subtle pulse, the warmth. Notice that you are noticing. That awareness, the one that is present right now, reading these words, hearing this voice, that awareness is not a product of your brain. Your brain is a product of it. That awareness did not begin when you were born. Your birth appeared within it. That awareness will not end when you die. Your death will appear within it. It is the one thing that has never changed in your entire life, even as everything else, every thought, every emotion, every cell in your body has been replaced many times over. It is the constant, the ground, the source, and it is what you are. You cannot unsee this. You were never meant to. The seeing is the point. The seeing is the shift. And the shift, once it takes root, does not reverse. It only deepens. It only clarifies. It only reveals more of what was always here, waiting, with infinite patience, for you to stop looking out there and turn your attention to the one who is looking. If something in this moved you, if something cracked open even slightly, stay with it. Do not rush to the next video or the next idea or the next distraction. Stay with the crack. Let it breathe. Let it widen on its own schedule. And if you feel called to, share this with someone who is ready for it. Not everyone is. But you will know who is, because they are the ones who already have the look in their eyes, the quiet restlessness, the sense that something fundamental is off about the world they were told to believe in. They are the ones who are ready to see what cannot be unseen. Subscribe if you want to go further. There is more to explore, and the depth does not have a bottom. But for now, just rest in what you have recognized. It is enough. It has always been enough. You have always been enough. Not because of what you do or what you know or what you have accomplished, because of what you are. And what you are is the awareness in which all of it appears. That is the truth. It was never forbidden. It was only forgotten. And now you remember.